Okay, everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here during your lunch hour. And my name, as Lucy said, is Karen Hannigan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which is a fancy letters to mean that I could actually I can actually diagnose people who may have some depression and help with them working on that. So what I do for a living is I've always worked with older adults. I've gone into the field. I've worked in nursing homes helping with support groups. I've worked in adult protective services. I've worked with caregivers and directly with older adults. Older adults are my passion. So I understand a bit the stresses of caregiving. I've watched it play out for the last 20 years. And what I'm hoping today, a lot of times when you talk about sad things like depression, it can be a sad conversation. And today I would prefer to give you some background. You're going to find that in my presentation, and let you know the stats and let you understand what the word depression might be. But the majority of time, or at least above half, I want to be on what we can do about it. So where can we go with this? How can we make it better for our caregivers who are doing amazing jobs out there with older adults? So some of you may be caregivers, some of you may know people who are taking care of others. Some of you, this should be applicable to almost everybody in our lives who are going through low moods and down moods. What can we do about it, and when do we really need to get concerned? So I'm going to jump into the presentation. I look forward to your questions at the end. Okay, the first thing is about the word depression. Some of you may have already thought, I don't like that word. You know, she's already used this word depression, and that sounds heavy and it sounds serious, and I don't have that. And that's fine. It's just a word that I know can trigger, especially for older generations. It can trigger some negative responses. So the word doesn't matter as much as what someone else might use. If any of you, if the word low mood if someone goes to a physician and they are they're having these low moods or blues or bummed out, whatever phrase you want to use that I showed on the previous slide, and you go to a physician, they can, or a licensed clinical social worker or any mental health professional, including just a regular physician too, a general practitioner, they can quote unquote diagnose you with a depressive disorder. Almost all of us have some of this our whole lives. You could probably fall into this zone. You don't need this diagnosis necessarily. It won't get much. It may get you some medications and a label that allows the physician to be paid, but I want you all to know kind of what they're looking at when they define official word depression. So there's this one called the major depressive disorder, and it means you have 5 or more of these symptoms present during the same 2-week period, and they represent a change from previous functioning. So this is a difference, and it's a down mood most of the day, nearly every day, as reported by yourself or others' observations. Sometimes we can't see what's really going on, so if someone else is reporting this, the diagnosis can be given. Diminished pleasure in almost all activities most of the day, nearly every day. Significant weight loss or weight gain, more than 5% of the body weight. We all respond to stress differently. I tend to not be able to eat, and so I will have weight loss when I have had symptoms of depression or anxiety. But other people may gain and need to eat as comfort. Insomnia or sleeping all day, so it's hard to get to sleep, or you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep. Fatigue, like a general tiredness. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt nearly every day. Diminished ability to think or concentrate. That one people sometimes miss. They think it's dementia, but it's really depression. And recurrent thoughts of death as a way out. So if you have 5 or more of these symptoms, or anyone that you know does, and you've observed these and they've gone on for 2 weeks, the clinical folks out there, the psychiatric world, could label that as a major depressive disorder. The second one I wanted to tell you about in that same book that describes mental health disorders is called dysthymia. Now that's a little different. That's a low mood for most of the day, for more days than not, as reported by individual or observation by others, for at least 2 years. So our caregivers, I know, are in for the long haul, and so situationally, the brain chemistry could change and create a depression based on how life is limited by the needs for caregiving. So this has to go on for about 2 years. It's a lower level of, it's not active in the bed depression, it's more poor appetite or overeating slowly. This kind of builds up. The insomnia or not sleeping, low energy or fatigue, low self-esteem, those thoughts about not being good enough, that happen for most of the day, for more days than not. Poor concentration or difficulty making decisions, and feelings of hopelessness, like just that this isn't going to get better. If that's gone on for at least 2 years, then it's a low-grade dysthymia is what they call it, for another word for depression. So there's other features with depression I want to talk to you about, and this is the last slide that's going to go towards those negative labeling pieces. But the depression, I want people to know that people who are depressed or low or blue or sad, they can also have anxious features. So you can have an agitated depression, and so you can see someone who's shaking and has too much energy, and they can actually still be depressed. There's also with catatonia, and that means that you really just stop speaking. You speak very little, you really go far down. It could be a seasonal pattern. Now we're getting into the winter, and so that can trigger it. And there's also one with melancholic features, so it's regularly worse in the morning. There's early morning awakening, again like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then you just can't get to sleep no matter what you do, but you went to sleep exhausted. And significant inability to eat. This one tends to be inability to eat rather than eating too much. Again, these are just little technical things that a psychiatric person would note on a chart. I'm telling it to you so that you understand that depression can be expressed very differently from person to person. And so the last thing I wanted you to know about that is that the opposite of depression is not happiness. It is vitality, the ability to feel the full range of emotions, including happiness, joy, pride, grief, sadness, anger, and surprise. People with true depression rarely, if ever, feel any of these emotions. So when I've gone out into the field and spoken to older adults that have a serious depression, I see a very flat affect, a very flat person who is not necessarily crying, not shaking, not feeling anything. So it's the wide range. It's okay to feel grief and sadness and anger regarding the caregiving and your life. It's when you stay flat and you have no up and down motion, but rather nothing at all, that I start to worry about clients and think about interventions, which is what I want to talk to you most about today. What do I do when I come across someone like this? And this can be for older adult or their caregiver. So a few stats: almost 20% of Americans have some form of depression, so it's pretty common. If you're a caregiver, that increases to 40%. You're at more risk because there's a lot more going on. It makes a lot more sense with everything on your plates. Unlike diabetes, cancer, or heart disease, which 80% of people get treatment, only 20% of those with depression realize that they have it and get treatment. So it's not just one blood test and easy to take care of. So when we talk about the title of this presentation, you're going to have a bad day caregiving. That's normal. You're going to have another bad day and another bad day or another moments in the day. It's when it becomes kind of flat and consistent and not yo-yoing that we want to take a look at it. Even mild levels of depression can impair functioning when coupled with chronic illnesses, pain, and the stresses of caregiving. So I've seen older adults do so much better with services when we try to treat these mild levels of depression, and they can be treated, and you do not necessarily need a professional, although those can help. So let me tell you, what can we do about this? There's a lot of common sense involved in how we can make this better. So I'm not going to go into this much, but this is a question that I would ask my caregivers or older adults. It's a standardized tool. We clinicians need these. Geriatric Depression Scale is what it's called, and it's been around for, I think, about 30 years, 20, 30 years, and it has validity. And we would ask these questions. Are you basically satisfied? Have you dropped many of your activities? Do you feel life is empty? Do you often get bored? Do you afraid something bad is going to happen to you? Do you feel happy most of the time or helpless? You go on. Now, some of these questions, as I was looking at them, I know that caregivers are going to naturally answer them a certain way, such as, have you dropped many of your activities and interests? Well, how are you supposed to fit those into your day if you're taking care of people? But I'm going to show you later that it's actually important to squeeze them in, but we're very well aware as caregivers those are going to be lower than those who don't have someone to take care of at home. So we would ask these questions that come up with a score, and we would be able to say, okay, you're mild, moderate, severe, and then no treatment course. So what to do next? I'm going to speak to you as if you have a friend who's taking care of someone else, and you're worried about depression. You say, hey, I've been in this webinar, and I learned about what depression is, and I'm concerned about you. And so you're looking at your friend who's got this going on, and they're taking care of, say, someone with Alzheimer's disease, and you're not. I know that's not the case with a lot of you, but I'm going to speak to you as if you would do this for a friend. And I think some of you caregivers out there are such caregivers that if I phrase it that way, you'll get it because you're always helping others. So this is what you would do, or what I would do with someone who I'm suspecting has some of the depressive symptoms that I just described. The first thing that I think about is that after listening to someone's story and just actively hearing what's going on with them, not trying to fix, not trying to say it's not so bad, not trying to convince people that it's going to get better, because that's about me needing to fix it for them. Asking those questions that you just heard and being very curious about the answer without having a look on my face like, oh no, just receiving what is their day like and being truly curious, which I am with caregivers and older adults. I love my profession, and I can sit and receive what's going on with them. And I think as friends, we love when people just listen and don't try to fix. After hearing everything about what's going on and thinking, okay, it could be depression, we clinicians often, we have to check for the willingness to tackle depression, low mood, anxiety, being in the dumps, whatever words they use, I use, and I say, all right, it might be my third or fourth visit to them, not the first one. I've been listening. I've heard this and this and this. I'm concerned a bit about what you're feeling, and we as county employees and as me as a clinician, I'm concerned about you as a whole person, not just someone who receives Meals on Wheels or other services, but you and how you are feeling day to day is of interest to me. I know a bit about depression. Would you be willing to listen and maybe even tackle feeling better? A lot of people when they're down are going to argue that there's nothing that can be done and be very low, and that's okay. There's ways to handle that, and I'll show you more in the presentation. So you could ask your friends about, okay, I've heard all this, what do you think about doing anything about it? And they might say, no, I don't want to do anything, and that's fine for now, and I would bring it up later and say, well, maybe I could hear a little bit about what's possible. So this is the questions that you can ask yourself or your friend or a loved one. I'm going to do it more as if it's a friend of yours that's going through this. I ask my clients, how would your life be better if you reduced your feelings of sadness and flatness and maybe had more energy? Energy is a good word. Like what do you think about doing some work that might regain some of your energy? What are the reasons not to do anything? Let's explore it. And there could be a lot of, look what I have on my plate, how am I supposed to do anything? I don't have a minute to myself during the day. And hearing those negatives and not trying to argue people away from them directly is what I do. I want to hear about all the negatives because I don't want this just to be my idea. And then what are the reasons to do something? And typically clients will have a little bit of hope. Well, you're willing to come out here, it doesn't cost anything, I guess I could try to do your stuff a little bit, and that's all that I need, a little crack in the door. And so this therapeutic model that I use, which is called motivational interviewing, we scale it. We say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all and 10 is let's get going now, how ready are you to consider taking action within the confines of your caregiving responsibilities to improve your mood, even though you have this life, and we're going to talk about the specifics of this life. What do you think about strategizing, you and me, about where we can do a little bit to increase the happy times and decrease the sadder times? On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? Because I've been doing a lot of talking. What do you really feel? And it's interesting. I'll show you the scale later. But if they say, well, I guess it's a 4, my response would be, okay, well, why isn't it a 3? I will go lower than what people say, and then they usually they argue me towards change, and they say, well, I think it's a 4 because you seem like you've got energy and ideas, and I'm curious what those are. And that makes them get into a certain mindset that I'm hoping, or helps them go to a certain mindset that I'm walking alongside them. I'm not really making anybody do anything. It's more like being a partner and walking alongside them. So if I get any interest, and if their interest is a 0, then they're not ready, and I say that's fine too. Services, I think about them, I'll give services, and then I will call and drop by again and see if anything's changed. But I don't often we usually get someone who's at least curious about what this might look like, and at least we're bringing some energy into them here in the county when we go out into the field. So what does the action look like when I get even a mild yes? The first thing really that you should think about for yourself and those that you love really is a visit to the doctor. People are often going anyway. Blood work, to be done, because this is a biopsychosocial. There is a biology. Once you've been in a depressed state, the brain actually changes, and it can't flip back to its usual without some help. So a lot of our clients are going to be put on SSRIs, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. That's the doctor doing it. You've heard of it: Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac, Lexapro. These have some side effects, but not many. These are good meds. I've seen good really good results of them. I know people in my personal life on them, and they tend to be good. They don't do the whole thing. So that kind of helps the brain gear up and get ready for potential slight change. And then we do something called behavioral activation, which I want to detail with you. And then if it needs more, we'll recommend private or group counseling. But I'll tell you, that last part is pretty rare. People don't have time for it. Counselors can be great. Counselors can be difficult. People have to find their own way, and so going to the private or group counseling, and I'll give you resources at the end, is actually probably maybe only 10% of the clients I work with, and 90% just stick with this behavioral activation. And let me show you what that is, along with the medication that their doctors put them on. So with behavioral activation, once I've got even a mild yes, and I have someone who is down and depressed, I show them this wheel where it says, you can see there's a circle, and it says decreased pleasant activities leads to lower mood, leads to decreased activity, which leads to decreased pleasant activities, lowered mood, and decreased activities. Most people think I can't increase my activities if my mood is lowered. First, my mood has to be better, and then I will do activities. That's actually what research shows is not where you break this cycle. The cycle needs to be broken on the where you see decreased activity and decreased pleasant activities. I'm going to look towards increasing those two, and then the mood gets shifted. I guess they used to say fake it till you make it, but it's not fake it, it's get moving and do anything, and then your mood may increase slightly, and the circle starts to shift and go the opposite direction. So this is what I would give to a client. We'd sit down. I'm going to be incredibly curious about their day. I want to know what their day is like. And physicians do not take the time to do this. They don't have the time typically. Even a psychiatric 50-minute appointment, they will do some of this. You as a friend could do this. I mean, maybe not with this form. I imagine that would be odd to pull it out in front of people. But if you know what I do, you can tell what our workers do here. You can use some of these ideas to maybe help someone else. So I would actually pull out the form, and I would say, all right, I'm curious about your typical day. Let's talk about yesterday or whatever day you want, and I'm curious about your current mood and your activity level, and I want to know about you. Now, me personally, I really love exercise, and so that's something that really helps me in my day. If you go through that, when you see that, you're going to see an increase in my mood. I love cooking. When I cook, you're going to see an increase in my mood. I am actually an introvert, so if you make me go to a party, my mood might go down and I might feel stressed. So each human is so different, and this is about getting to know the people that I work with, caregivers and the older adults. So I would go or I would leave this with an older adult, it depends, to just fill it out, and they would go through it and mark what they do in the morning, what do they do in the afternoon, what they do in the evening. I have a lot more slots in the one I use, and I will typically leave it with a client, and they can talk about how they feel. When they wake up, they feel horrible. It was 3 in the morning. Then their son called at noon, and they felt a little better. It went to a 3. And then the afternoon, they heard some news that wasn't so good. They were watching the news, and it went down. And then maybe in the evening, a neighbor brought over her dog, and they love animals, and their mood went back up. So I'm going to try to tease out. No one's mood is the exact same. When you say you have a bad day, typically no one has a complete bad day. There are ups and downs in all of our days. We don't have to go so much minute by minute, but I'm curious about those ups and downs, because I want to build on the ups that the older adults have already identified for themselves. I'm not going to come up with them. So sometimes, though, you need a little push, like, okay, what can I do? Even within my caregiving role, what can I do? The checklist of life activities or events that make you feel good. So we have a list, and people come up with far more than what's on this list. The list is just designed to help people think in terms of what they might be able to do. We had a woman with congestive heart failure, and she couldn't go very far. She couldn't move like she used to. She used to be a great gardener. She can't reach down anymore, so we talked about, would one plant do it, or 2, or basil, and which kind of plant would that be, and could she go outside and get some sun on her face while she was doing a little bit, and if we did it a box that was up high, and what would she need for that? Another woman liked to read her Bible, and she was reading it at home. It was very dark, and we talked about, well, maybe if you read it outside with the sun on your face. It was a very small change, but something. So you can see all these different events. There's some for extroverts, introverts, spiritual, recreational. Physical activity might not be possible, or it might. Some involve getting out of the house, some involve staying in the house, but it can go very far wide choices that people can make. So then identifying activities and steps to take to feel better. So after we go through all this, the client themselves, the individual themselves, says, hey, what do you like to do? And you could even say to your friends, you know, these days, what really are you like? You're my friend. We've done a lot of different things. You're now a caregiver. Things have shifted. what do you love to do? What really gives you relaxation now or happiness? And so the older, typically this would be a single older adult that I'm working with, and so they would write an activity. If they can't write because of physical disability, I would for them. Pick something that they want to accomplish or enjoy, because by the way, accomplishments where you help others, I know I'm talking to the choir here, make you feel good too. It's not just about pure selfish enjoyment, which I would encourage you to be quote-unquote selfish, but sometimes selfless acts make you feel really great too. Choose something that is not too difficult and break it into steps. So we're not going to do something huge like I want to learn how to do, I want to do 10 push-ups a day every day for the next month. You know, that would be too much if the person hadn't been active. So I would kind of slow that down and think about help you may need from others. So especially the caregivers who are unable to get out and about, what kind of help might you need from others? I think in terms of our telephone, what you're doing today, you're on the phone so you don't have to leave. You can fit this into your work day. Telephone support groups that we have would be possible, but going out and driving an hour to a place and sitting there in the support group may not be possible. So we get really specific about what it is that we want to start trying and what kind of help we need and the steps to go about that. So I had talked to you, once we do all that, that's a lot of talking with the clients and pretty much pulling them towards their own, what they love in life but have forgotten or can't do or felt they can't do. And I have to constantly check that I'm not pushing and deciding for people what's going to help them. I need to walk alongside them and not in front of them. So I will, there's actually a ruler that you can pull out. I don't often do that, but you can say, all right, we've talked a lot about this. How do you really feel? Because a lot of times caregivers and older adults are going to say all the right things to make me happy and be taking care of others, but what do they really, really, really want to do? So you have to create a safe place where they can say, you talked about all that, I don't really want to do any of it. It's like, okay, you don't want to do any of it. It's still here, all the forms are filled out. Maybe we can get back to it again, and maybe not. You know, I had a client once say to me, because I was really trying to get her out, and it had been 5 visits, and we were going to go out, and 5 times she canceled on me, but she loved me showing up and talking. And I said, I really want to get out. And she goes, why do you need to get out? And I said, you know what? You're right. I don't need to get out. I'll just visit with you. And we had a great time, and she laughed, and she didn't want to go out, but I think her mood was improved by what we did do, which was just connect a little bit. So, but if someone says it's a 5, I would again say, why isn't it a 3? And then they could argue me about why it's a 5, because are you sure it's not a 3? And then they could say, no, no, it really is a 5. I really do want to try to do this, but I don't think it'll be great. So, okay, 5's great. And what would make you more ready? Is there anything I can do to make your 5 a 6? And they might say yes, they might say no. And if it's, yeah, I don't like the transportation metro access because I have to wait around, if you could find me a volunteer, I would be more likely that I'm going to jump on that and help with that. I'm sorry. So, so this is what I would do, and then we would go ahead and implement this and have these changes go on for an older adult, and we would try to see what worked and what didn't, because nothing is going to go perfectly. So once they would try something, they may only try 10% of something they wanted to do. I had one client who wanted to just call her sister more often, and so she needed to make sure that she could, this was back when long distance mattered, and the sister had to be there, and when was she going to be there, and her hearing was bad, the sister's hearing was, so how are we going to make that happen? And it didn't work. So then we discussed what didn't work. Well, the timing wasn't right, she has a hearing deficit, how could we fix that? So we talked about the family out there getting an amplified phone for her sister, who was in Illinois, I think, and they agreed to do that. And so it's about seeing what the roadblocks are, and even in caregiving, the roadblocks are, I don't feel safe leaving my family member, so okay, maybe I don't, maybe someone else stays with them, but I'm in the next room, or I'm out gardening, or you know, I had a friend of mine that I went to visit in Denver, and she has 2 little kids, and she couldn't leave. And I said, what would make you feel good? I could see her anxiety. And she goes, this bathroom's been driving me crazy. I want to organize it. I said, let's do it. And we put on music and started organizing it together, and it makes all the difference. to organizing it alone, than with all that pressure. So sometimes it's just getting something accomplished and walking in their shoes, but not needing them to change. That is the best energy to bring to people in your lives who have low mood or depression or anxiety due to caregiving or for whatever other reasons are going on in their lives. Now, I did say if you get to the point, we do have clients who are thinking about actively taking their own lives, and we do ask about that. Um, you can never put that idea in someone's head. I know that's an uncomfortable question. I wouldn't imagine any of you are going to ask your friends that, but I do ask that straightforward. Have you been thinking about harming yourself or taking your own life? I usually get, oh no, I wouldn't do that. Often because of their faith and different reasons, but sometimes I've gotten, well, I've thought about it, and then I do not get nervous. I get very, very interested. Okay, how far have you gotten with that thought? I want to share with you one thing that you should know. Anybody, and certainly in a caregiving situation, this may come up. It is normal for people, anyone, sometimes to think about, would it be better if I weren't here, or this would just end? To think about the possibility of taking your own life is not unusual. I'm not saying everyone does it, but it is actually more common than people would ever tell you. It's a common thought process. But that doesn't worry me. The thought that you could do it and choose not to is all right. People have to feel like they have some level of control. It's when they tell me, yeah, I've thought about it and I've started planning. Okay, tell me about the plan. If they say, I've thought about it, but I would never really do it, that's okay. I say, okay, well, when you think about it, what happens? Sometimes people feel relief. Well, I choose not to. Okay. But when they start to say, oh, I had a client who said, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Have you ever thought about it before? Yes, I have. Have you ever done anything about it? Yes, I have. What have you done? And they talked about getting pills in the past, and I'm going to become very, very interested in all of that to see if it's real, and then I will ask about the suicide. But you all probably wouldn't go that far. We have, and we've actually had a couple of people I think that we have saved, just a few, but those feel good. But if it is more than this behavioral activation, the little bit of the SSRI medication can do, if the low mood and depressed status is getting more into those suicidal thoughts, or none of these things are working and the person, again, is completely flat, not up and down, but flat and lacking in vitality and losing too much weight, and we're getting into to troubling places, then we're going to have to talk about clinicians. And there are some very good ones out there, and there's some who will come out to the home for my older adults. And those, I have a list here, but I certainly can have more. I'm going to give you a phone number to call. The first question I get with older adults is who's going to pay for it. So Medicare does pay for some counseling related to depression and anxiety and anything else that's in the manual for mental health disorders. And so this is a list. We are constantly at the Area Agency on Aging trying to keep a list of clinicians who are who specialize in working with people who have depression or other things, for older adults who have mobility concerns or can't get out of the house, who do home visits, or who will take Medicare. And I actually have a list that's even bigger than this. But what I would really want you to do, if anybody has a pen and paper, is to call us. I supervise the unit that does the intake. If anyone has a question or concern, I want to talk about their specific situation in a private way. I'm going to even give you as caregivers my personal line. I have have an interest in this, and if we talked, and I do think that you felt talking helped and wanted to engage with, usually it's a time limited, you would go to maybe 7, 8 sessions and learn more about depression, much more than I could talk about now, and what to do about it. I would give these types of referrals and other referrals for an individual depending upon where they lived and what the insurance is, and we could go from there. So they may need to go into more of a counseling, or I would advise that people don't have to do anything they don't want to do unless they're a danger to themselves or others, and say you might really benefit from this because the behavioral activation hasn't lifted things and I'm worried about you. And so I'm going to give you my direct number right now. Mine is 703-324-5866. So 324-5866. But then I have a general intake number, and this is for Fairfax County residents, although caregivers call us from all over the country, and they talk about bringing their older adult to see them, and I'm very happy to speak to anybody. But the Fairfax County, my team of 6 social workers would answer and listen to people's individual stories. They don't do counseling, but they would try to hook people up with services related to trying to lift depression or share the burden and the joys of caregiving. So their number is 324-7948. It's 703-324-7948. And it's a must-answer line from 8 to 4:30. And the first question we always ask is just what's going on, and we will listen. And sometimes just that conversation is enough for people, or knowing in the future they could tap this resource or that resource, but they don't want to do it right now. Very, very happy to get those calls. And oftentimes our caregivers call and say, well, my dad has this and needs this, and I hear all about their father or all about their mother or their spouse or their sister or whoever isn't the one needing care. And at the end, my staff typically ask, and how are you doing? And they tend to say, God, no one ever asked that. They get a little flummoxed and say, thank you for asking, and then tell a little bit, because we're independent folks. We don't have, unlike children or other people or friends in your lives, we can listen to what's going on and be empathetic and not have to try to fix you. So that's a resource that's available if you just even need to talk. And we're very willing to do that and want to do that to support our caregivers. So that's about my 45 minutes that I was going to talk. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right. So that was a lot of great information. And remember, if you're on the line, if you have a question, you have a little dashboard there. Just type your question in the dashboard, and we have about 15 minutes to ask Karen some questions. So thank you for mentioning the ADCR line. The Adult Disability and Caregiver Resources line, and you said that people could call that to just start to talk about what's going on with them.
Just the feelings.
Yep. What other reasons would people call that phone number?
Oh, okay. They would call it for both hard services like Meals on Wheels, help at home, with a respite care, someone to stay in the home that they would trust so that they could get out. We have a waiver system. It's Medicare, Medicaid, but it's a Medicaid program, excuse me, where you can get a lot of help at home and it wouldn't be expensive. We have sliding scales, the help at home. We have people who call about adult protective services. We go out for that. We have people who call about ramps that need to be built or homes that need to be cleaned. Anything that's designed to keep the family support system operating in the community and not going into nursing homes or assisted living, and keeping the caregiver supported. We will tell the caller about the services that are funded by the county at the federal level, the not-for-profits. We try to keep a pulse on everything that's going on in Northern Virginia to pull in when we hear an individual story, hey, this is a technical piece of assistance and there's an emotional piece of assistance. So we're trying to hit both sides of that for the entire family system.
Do I have to be a Fairfax resident to call that line?
You want to be This is for Fairfax. This is for Fairfax County, yes. If you do not have someone, though, that's with you now, but you're thinking about taking care of them, they're out in Minnesota, you can call. And if you also just don't know what other number to call, but you want to get hooked into someone, say you live in Arlington, or even you have a friend who's in Nebraska, my unit will look up that number for you and get you going on to the next place. But as far as providing direct services, and we'll probably still listen to the story and what's going on, we wouldn't be able to put in the direct, more technical, hard services that we discussed, but we certainly listen to the story and hook you up with whoever's, because nationwide there's different services in different areas. What I'm talking about is for Fairfax, but we never turn down a phone call. I never think of a phone call as a wrong call if it's a caregiver or an older adult who's struggling.
So you could also help somebody from out of the area, or if their loved one is out of the area, find help in where they live.
Yep, and also listen to what they're going through, emotionally, and then, but the technical assistance would be, yes, with another group.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Our next question, what if elderly family member is very resistant to getting help? Where do you start?
Yeah, that resistance factor. It's a great question. I have a couple tricks that I use. I think sometimes when it's family members, there's a struggle there that happens because you have certain roles with your loved one, and trying to insist that they get help is shifting those roles, which makes resistance come on even harder and faster because we all want to be independent. Sometimes putting a professional like myself or through that line that I gave you into the mix is a little helpful with lowering the emotion. So one of the things I often do when I have a resistant older adult is say, okay, listen, you paid taxes. Your whole life you paid taxes. Your taxes, whether you're working now or not, you paid into the system. I'm part of the, quote, the system, and the system exists to take care of people and make sure they don't go into nursing homes or assisted livings, and that they do the best they can in the community. It is free, and so why not let someone come out, what we call them case managers, and discuss what your situation is and tell you about services, and you don't need to have them right now, but you can hear them. And then maybe if you, as the caregiver, a friend or a relative, you're there with the care manager is doing most of the talking, and you and your loved one are hearing it at the same time, and can say, maybe they're not ready at this time for the services, but they listen. And sometimes I will say, when I can see the need is high, why don't you try the Meals on Wheels for a month, and then if you hate them, stop. Try the home health aid for a little while. If you don't like it, stop. Just, if you can give it a shot. And hopefully hearing it from a third party who they quote unquote paid, you pay our salaries, and having it on their own turf in their own home will be helpful. Sometimes I do encourage caregivers to tell, depending on the relationship, saying, hey, Dad, if you take Lifeline where you press if you've fallen down, it helps me with my day, and my worry goes down. Because typically they love you and they want to lower your stress, but they also want to remain independent. So that's a tough line to walk, and putting in a non-judgmental, curious, low-key, knowledgeable, free, home visiting case manager is really what I recommend for them. And they'll let you at least come in and talk about what's going on. Sometimes if they refuse, and they absolutely refuse, in therapy we call that pre-contemplation stage. It means they're not ready yet to accept services. They're in denial, and they need their denial to kind of power through the day. And we've tried everything. I will reverse and ask the caregiver, okay, how can you be okay that you've turned over every stone and now it is what it is, and how can you take care of yourself when you have the stress that they're not taking care of themselves, but you've done everything you can. There's boundaries, they're making choices, we're all adults, and help them work through their feelings, and maybe be with other people who have the same resistant parents and say, oh, my dad did this, yes, mine did that, and get them the help they need, because people do go into denial. I may refuse services and need to think I'm doing better than I am in order to get through each day, and then sometimes reality comes right up and you're kind of ready because you've been with a case manager who's told you what might happen. But in that case, then you as a caregiver need to feel you've done everything and and know that maybe it's not ripe yet, but you've made the connection. So that's what I would do. But I get in there often by saying, you're a taxpayer, let me come talk to you. It's not going to hurt.
That's a good tack, and I have to give my testimony that worked with my mother-in-law in California.
Because they don't want to spend any money, but they also don't want to feel like they wasted money. So use their value system, right?
Yes, that was really good. Next question. My mom is coming home from a rehab facility tomorrow where she was social and active and sought out people. At home, she preferred to stay at the house. How do I keep her active when she gets home? Because being social was what she wanted at rehab. I don't want to push her either.
Ah, very good. Okay. Well, I'm hoping my talk was a little helpful about that, about how to talk to her. And you might be very able to sit down with her and say, hey, even before she leaves the rehab, I would ask an open-ended question. If she hasn't left yet, I think she's still there. She's about to come home, right? Is that
Coming
right?
home tomorrow, right?
Coming home tomorrow. Okay. I might say, hey, you know what I noticed when you were in rehab, that you were doing this and this and this and this. How did that feel? An open-ended question. Never, you must do such and such. I saw you better, so you need to do such and such. Mom, you need to. Even caregivers are told, you need to relax. You need to get a break. Those you need tos or you shoulds are not helpful. So if you just turn a phrase a certain way, like, hey, I thought I saw that you were doing, that you seemed to enjoy some of those activities. How did you feel about those activities? An open-ended question. Tell me how that place felt to you. What were the good things? What were the bad things about being there? And really listening to how they felt in an activity. Maybe they went and they actually didn't like it. Maybe they went to certain ones and loved it. Maybe it was really a person that they connected with rather than the activity. So just being curious about their day. Like how did you feel about that? And then if they say, well, I really liked blah, 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 whatever they really like, then you latch onto that, listen to all the negative, but ask questions about the good. Well, I really liked when da-da-da-da-da happened. And then you can ask more about that and say, oh, tell me more about that. How was that? You really liked it? And usually they'll go on more, and then you can say, would you want to continue that at home, or what are you thinking about that? Some very low-key, not pressured ways of saying, because I think what you're saying to me, the questioner is saying, is you could see that the depression or the low mood got better when they were doing the activity. So the behavioral activation, which is what you now know it's called, is what she was doing, and it lifted her mood, and you saw it, and the question is, does she see it? So I would think about that scaling, like, okay, do you want to do anything that's similar to that, even though you're not in the facility anymore? What do you think? Would you want me to look into it or not? And let them have the choice, rather than, I saw you were better, I know you're better, and I love you so much, you should do this. The shoulds and the musts and needs to, we'll turn them off real quick. But what do you think about we explore together what's possible, Mom? I'm curious too. I'm getting older too. I've got friends. I've got people who are coworkers. I'm kind of curious what's out there. I didn't know this whole world was out there. Didn't even know rehab was out there. What do you think about just listening to people, and then see where she goes? And if she says no, say, okay, well, maybe not now, maybe later. And it's hard, but you can't get too far ahead of them. But I would be very, 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 very interested in how she experienced that rehab and where her good times were and where her not so great times were. But the questioner knows that there's blind spots. Your mom is going to have blind spots that you don't have, but you can't go too hard on those. You have to listen to them about, well, what do you think would make you feel better? Do you want to feel better? What do you think? You're the expert on you, Mom. How what would it look like if things got better for you, besides winning the lottery, which we all say. But I think just being exquisitely interested and not saying shoulds or must, and just being very, very curious about when she feels better, and then asking her for permission, can I explore with you how to increase those happy times with you, because I don't know this stuff either. Can we do it together? Is that something you'd be willing to do? And if you get even a slight yes, then going forward and maybe plugging in that extra professional in, with the understanding that they don't have to take anything we offer. We'll come out there and tell them about the menu, and then they can choose off the menu or not. And that might be good, because there are some ideas I have immediately. Of course, the senior centers and different things that can be done to keep people active. And by the way, studies do show, of course, if you sit around home all day and stare at the same four walls or TV or your books, and you do not socialize with others, your mood is going to go down. And you saw that. And even me as an introvert, you got to get out there a little bit. And then you can come back and retreat to your solitude. But not getting out is tied to depressive features, which aren't good for anybody.
Thank you so much. And this will be our final question. We're coming up to 1 o'clock. Is there any income limit to the services that you mentioned?
Yes. Well, there's a sliding scale to a lot of them. The in-home services, it's pretty generous. I think for an individual, you're getting close to $2,000 a month. At least that feels generous to me. But there are some other services. The Fairfax County has been fantastic about making sure that money does not completely get in the way of providing some level of services to everyone in this county. Now, that doesn't mean that we can do the in-home care for free for everybody who wants it, who have resources, or we would not be fiscally responsible. However, we've partnered with Innova, the healthcare system, and we have a team in here. They're called ElderLink, and we would refer you to them. You can have any income and get that social worker to come out in the field and talk about all of this for free. It's called case care management, and on the private market it costs you about $150 an hour. But we're going to give you, at least the beginning of services like that for free, even if it's a high income. And then if there's respite care or care after that, we're still going to try to soften that blow and get it sliding scale on some level for you. And we have volunteers who go out, and there's no cost to them, and we have Meals on Wheels, which is donation only. So Older Americans Act asks for donations but doesn't insist on payment. There's other programs that insist on payment. Just to wrap it up, there are services that came down and ideas for older adults that came down in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, 2010. They all have different rules and regulations, and we know those, so we can explain them to you. But there certainly are some services where we don't care if you have $10,000 a month. We will give you at least an hour of free consult about what's going on. And if there's adult protective services issues or massive stress, that phone call to my unit is always available. We don't care what anybody's income, caregiver or older adult, is. But once you get to the technical, like in-home care, we're going to have to be a little bit more careful with the services and do that sliding scale.
Great. So the best thing to do is to call. Talk about your individual situation, and the main line for that is 703-324-7948.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Karen. This has been really helpful. This presentation has been recorded, and I will send out a link once the recording is all uploaded so you can listen to this again. And we hope that you'll join us next week for our final webinar of the season, Simple Meals for Healthy Eating, which is next Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. Thanks, everybody, for your attendance, and especially thank you, Karen, for giving us all that great information.
All right, great.